Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back. At Humanity at Scale, we explore what it takes to create organizations where people don't just work together, they thrive together. Leadership isn't about strategy, just about strategy or decision-making. It's about fostering the kind of human interactions that build trust, fuel collaboration, and create lasting impact. But there's a challenge. Conflict, whether personal, political, or cultural, can get in the way. We see it everywhere. Tensions in teams, division in communities, and a growing reluctance to engage with people who think differently. When conflict isn't handled well, it erodes relationships, weakens culture, and holds leaders back from creating truly human-centered organizations. So how do we move beyond the fractures? How do leaders, and all of us, turn conflict into connection? To help us explore this, I'm honored to welcome Tania Israel, a renowned author, researcher, and professor of counseling psychology at UC Santa Barbara. She's the author of Facing the Fracture and Beyond Your Bubble, two books that offer practical tools for navigating difficult conversations and bridging divides. Tania has spent decades helping leaders and teams turn human conflict into an opportunity for stronger relationships, deeper trust, and better outcomes. Tania, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, Tania, you've had such a fascinating career as a professor, author, thought leader. How would you summarize your professional journey in your words?
Well, for over a quarter of a century, I have been a professor of counseling psychology, and I focused a lot of my work on interventions to support LGBTQ communities. But I have this whole other line of work that I've developed primarily since 2016 on helping people navigate political division. And, 2016 was quite a wake-up call for a lot of people around how divided our country is. And so I felt like that's given me an opportunity to do something meaningful in a very timely concern that we have.
Well, it's awesome that the world has given you a lot of material for your work in the last several years.
Indeed. Yes, so much fodder.
As you think about your background and when you first sparked interest in human connection and dialogue to begin with, was there a moment or experience that made you realize this work was truly needed and it's what you wanted to do?
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to the 1990s for this, where I started a group to bring together pro-choice and pro-life people to have dialogue with each other. And I was just tired of being angry, and I was like, maybe there's something different that we can do. And this group was transformational for me. It didn't change anything about how I felt about abortion, but it changed so much about how I felt about people who disagreed with me on it. It helped me to humanize other people. It helped me to really understand their perspectives from within the context of their own values and experiences. And I really brought that forth with me throughout the rest of my career, because certainly when I've been doing LGBTQ psychology, I've come into contact with people who didn't necessarily agree with me, but I've really been able to approach that with some curiosity of wanting to know, where are they coming from? And if there's something that I'm trying to communicate, how can I do that so that it's going to be within the context of what's important to them? So that's really what started it, was way back then.
It's interesting. You mentioned curiosity. I think we're going to be spending a little bit of time down the road talking about that. Now, I'd love to, as you think about the work you've done with so many people navigating deep divides, can you share a moment that stands out where you saw a real shift happen because of a humanity-focused approach, either to leadership or individuals, and what made it work?
Absolutely. So now I'm going to go to 2016 where, there was this wake up call and I was like, okay, what can I do to help? People are really having trouble connecting. Is there something I can do? So I started creating resources. The first was something that I call the flow chart that will resolve all political conflict in our country.
Wow.
Because I know, right? It's a powerful tool. Spoiler alert, it has not yet resolved all political conflict in our country, but I tend to think it's just a distribution issue. So you can download it for free from my website, and then it's just going to solve everything. But it was really something where I was like, okay, do you want to have this conversation? If so, how do you go about doing that effectively? And then I thought, well, maybe people don't know how to do the things that I'm suggesting they do, like how to listen effectively and how to understand somebody else's perspective. So then I created a workshop to try to help people to build those skills that would be helpful in dialogue. And that really led to my book, Beyond Your Bubble, which is specifically about how to engage in dialogue, how to do that. So this book came out right before the 2020 election, and that was, a pretty conflictual time. And so there was a lot of interest in that. People got this book and people had been through my workshops. And I saw a lot of things happening just in those workshops and in the conversations that I was having with people about it. They seemed to be embracing these tools. But something that really let me know how personally valuable these tools can be is I have a friend who, during the hardest times of the pandemic, her stepbrother became very ill and was really not going to make it that much longer. And so she wanted to go and help to care for him, but she was like, I don't know how I'm going to do there because our politics are so different. She's very progressive and he's got Fox News on all the time. And she's like, I don't know how I'm going to even be there. She said, Tania, I'm packing your book and I'm bringing it with me. And she has told me then how she was not only able to be there with him and to care for him through the rest of his life, but to be with his friends who were much more, similar to her stepbrother politically, and to, be able to appreciate what everybody was bringing to be helpful in this situation and not just see people in these kind of narrow views of what their politics are. So that to me was really a symbol of how hard this time is and how much personal relationships and family relationships are being tested in this time, and how much we need tools and support that are going to help us to find our way through.
Well, it's interesting. While there are tools and ways to bridge the divides, like you talk about in your book, why do you think that people aren't gravitating towards them? Is it that people just haven't, are they believing that they can't bridge the divide, or is it that they're not motivated to bridge the divide?
That is exactly the question that led me to my second book, because although there were some people who are like, oh, this book about dialogue Beyond Your Bubble is so helpful, and that's exactly what I needed because I wanted to have dialogue, but I wasn't sure how to do it. And that was great for some people. And then there were the other people who said to me, well, it's really nice you wrote this book about how to have dialogue, but I don't want to talk to those people, but I'm still kind of losing it. So what do you have for me? And so that led me to write Facing the Fracture, where I was like, okay, we're going to address, not starting with dialogue, but starting with what are the things that are keeping people from wanting to have dialogue or that are just stressing and distressing people in these divided times. So, for example, we don't want to talk to other people because we have these ideas in our mind about who those people are. And some of that is because of the news that we consume or the way we interact with social media or just our own cognitive biases. So I start there. I'm like, let's try to consume news more wisely and use social media intentionally, and then also be aware of the ways that cognitive biases actually make us see people as being extreme and hostile and selfish. And we're all seeing each other that way. So of course course we don't want to talk to other people, and then there are things that we need to build. We need to build resilience and compassion and intellectual humility. And once we've done all of that, maybe we're actually going to want to have a conversation with another person. But I honestly think that in some cases, dialogue isn't even the most important thing for us to address. That really it's how we're struggling just within our own minds and ourselves, and that's going to help us whether or not we're actually engaging with other people.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to go back to your first book because I don't want to, even though we jumped to the second one, we'll get to that. I want to hear a little bit more about Beyond Your Bubble. And you have a lot of ideas and approaches for handling conflict. What have been some of the most surprising ways you've seen its ideas applied in real life?
So some of the basic tools that we need to have are we need you said you want to talk about curiosity. So this is a great opportunity to do that. Because I will teach listening skills, and I've taught listening skills for decades. We need to give somebody uninterrupted time to speak. We need to reflect back what we hear. We need to ask open-ended questions. But if we do all of those things mechanically, or if we do all of those things even aggressively, that is not going to lead to productive dialogue. That it's not even necessarily about the skills, but it's about what is our desire that we are going in with? What's our intention? And if we go in with curiosity and really, truly wanting to understand other people, I hear people say these days, I just can't understand how people could, vote for this person or do this thing or agree with that thing. And people say it in that sort of way, like, I don't understand. And sometimes even with some pride, like, I am so knowledgeable or I am so moral, like, I can't understand how someone could do this. Well, I sort of wonder, when is it that we started to think that not being able to comprehend other human beings was a badge of honor? And so that's really the key is we've got to go in wanting to know, really opening up to that, how could other people think that way? And really going in with that angle. So that's one of the big insights that I got was it's not just about the skills that we really have to come in with the approach of wanting to understand.
Yeah, interesting. One of the things that I've sort of realized as I've been building out the humanity at scale work is that people end up thinking that their morals and values are superior to other people's morals and values, or that those other people don't have morals or values. And what I've realized is one of the eye-opening things to me is that people who have completely different views from mine have equal rights to their morals and values and are as moral and as value rich as I am, but we still ended up in the wrong place. So how do you think about bridging that gap between, having curiosity, but maybe in the end, just having fundamental differences that you're not going to eventually resolve, right? You might end up in the same place where you were, at least when it comes to the core issues that you have conflict over.
Oh, and that's so important, really thinking about what is your goal going into this conversation? And when I ask people, what is it that you're trying to get out of dialogue with somebody who disagrees with you politically? There's four primary answers to that question. Some people say, there's someone in my life who I want to stay connected with, and we're having trouble doing that because of our differences. Some people say, I want to persuade or convince someone. Some people want to find common ground or heal the divide. And some people say, I simply cannot fathom how people can think or act or vote as they do, and I'm trying to gain some insight. Well, it turns out no matter which of those goals you have, what you want to do is to create a warm connection with somebody and to try to understand them. We sometimes think what we're supposed to do when we, especially if we want to persuade someone, is to lay out all of these arguments and research and our rationale, and that's what's going to make a difference. So really it's a matter of thinking, what am I trying to achieve here? And you're talking about, well, what if you're not going to resolve it? Well, none of those goals actually necessitate coming to an agreement. Because even if you're trying to persuade somebody, what you most want to do is to become a trusted person to them and to let them know that you care about them and that you're respectful of where they're coming from. That's going to go the farthest to convincing them, but you might not get to that in that conversation. You might never get to that. So you might come out of it just understanding more why you disagree rather than coming to agreement.
Interesting. So when people go through that and are trying to work through the conversation together, I know in your research you explore psychological barriers that get in the way and biases. Can you share what you think some of those are and maybe how people can start overcoming them?
Absolutely. So this is where cognitive biases really come into play. I'm going to go back even earlier than the 1990s. When humans were evolving, um, we lived in small groups of people or tribes. And we were protecting ourselves and our people, not just from the elements and the saber-toothed tigers, but also from the other tribes who were really a threat to our existence, because we're in competition for scarce resources. So our brains as humans developed to see our own group as being protective and caring, and to see the outside groups as being threatening. And we're still in that state where we see how caring our own group is, and we believe that we are motivated by benevolence and by caring for others, and we think that the other group is motivated by hostility and hatred. And everybody's believing that about each other. Some of the earlier work on there's this cognitive bias called motive attribution asymmetry. That's the one where we see ourselves as benevolent. We think that they're motivated by hate. A lot of that work started in the Middle East. And, you talk to Israelis and Palestinians, and they'll both say, oh, yes, my side is motivated by caring and love, and the other side is hateful and wants to destroy my group. And so we see this play out in all kinds of different ways. So that's, I think, the most corrosive bias that we have. We also have biases where we are focused on information that we believe that is just consistent with what we already believe to be true. And we ignore or dismiss information that conflicts with our existing beliefs. That's confirmation bias. And then there's the other bias called naive realism, where we think that we are objective and that the other side is biased. So all of these come together. You can see how they play out just in people's beliefs about people on the other side in political conflict. What I find to be useful and empowering about knowing these things is that once you know them, you can recognize them. That if you start thinking, oh my gosh, the other side is so hateful, they're trying to do harm to my people. I always go, oh, wait, I wonder if there's another way to see that also. Like, yeah, sure, I can make an argument for that. But can I also think of a way that they might actually have other motivations, something that they care about that they're maybe trying to protect?
It's interesting. It's almost combining the combination of intentionality and curiosity, right? Getting yourself to be triggered, to have curiosity, where when most of the time situations like that, we're probably triggered in a different direction. So maybe talk about that, right? When we're faced with someone who we see as from another group or having a different opinion, what are we normally triggered to do versus what would you want them to be doing at that moment when they're triggered by someone who has a different point of view?
Absolutely. I hear from people so much these days. People say, well, I feel unsafe with this person, or I feel unsafe in this conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, you feel unsafe. Like, how do we get you out of danger? And they're like, oh, no, no, no. I'm not in danger. I just feel unsafe. So this is actually a really important distinction between being unsafe, like being in actual danger, and feeling unsafe. So We often feel unsafe when we feel threatened. And the reason for this is that we're responding to everything again when our brains developed, we're responding to everything as if we're faced with a saber-toothed tiger. And so what our bodies do when we feel threatened is we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, where we're getting ready to run away or to fight that tiger. So our adrenaline's flowing, our face is getting flushed, our breathing is shallow, our muscles are tense. And if we are in danger, the best thing that we can do is to fight or to get out of there. If we are not in actual danger, the healthiest and most empowering thing that we can do is to try to modify what's going on in our bodies and to calm our nervous system. So we can do that, first of all, like when you recognize it, that's helpful so that you can really start to focus on it. And then just some deep breathing is really helpful. We're breathing all the time. We can do kind of slower, deep breathing without, even alerting the other person to the fact that we're doing a thing. So breathing, if you can also kind of bring yourself back into your body by just touching your own hand or feeling the chair underneath you or the ground under your feet. So all of these things are going to help to calm the nervous system. And that's going to mean that you're going to be able to stay in that conversation much more easily to be able to accomplish those goals that you have.
It's interesting. I feel like a lot of the discussions I have about how people should behave sound a little bit like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? That we have to recognize something in ourselves. We can name it, we can recognize it, and then do something about it. Is that sort of the flow here, which is instead of jumping into something, recognizing it, and then having some internal strategies to deal with that situation differently than you would normally flow to?
Yeah, it's so funny. As a psychologist, like my whole field has been about helping people to get connected to their feelings. And I feel like what I'm saying is, yes, pay attention to your feelings, but don't let that be the only source of information that you have. Also be able to assess, like, am I actually in danger? What are the goals that I have? And and here's another thing that's important. Probably one of the greatest insights I've gotten doing this work is that people have more than one want or more than one goal. So they might have a goal to connect with somebody else, but they also really want to just be able to express themselves freely. And they might want to find common ground, but they also want to feel validated in their views. So it's really important that we recognize these sort of maybe more overt goals that we have in terms of connection, but we also recognize those other things that might be going on for us that we are trying to get something out of this conversation. And I'm sometimes like, if you want to feel validated, maybe you should talk to somebody who already agrees with you. That's going to be a much better place to go for that than to go with conflict.
Great. Now I'd like to get your thoughts on leadership and focus on sort of how this applies in organizations. So how do you think leaders can apply these principles to create organizations that are more human-centered?
Leaders are in such a difficult position these days. So I'm hearing so much from leaders, corporate leaders, campus leaders, community leaders, who are all really struggling with all the different demands that they're feeling from people about things. People are saying, oh, you should be making public statements aligned with this perspective, when they're like, not everybody here agrees with that perspective. And I don't know if that's really my role. People are also asking me, like, how do I deal with the conflict that's happening among people in my organization? Should we just not be talking about politics at work? So there's so much the leaders are trying to navigate right now. So in terms of how do you deal with conflict in the workplace and what do you do about, should we just not talk about politics at work? We do sort of have this idea that maybe we shouldn't be talking about politics at work, but here's one of the challenges. It's not just about politics like who did you vote for, or what political party do you belong to, because that tribal setup that I was talking about before, we have lots of ways that we indicate what tribe we're in. So It's even things like what car do you drive, or what language do you use to talk about this thing, or do you put your pronouns in your Zoom name? Like there's so many different ways that we are communicating. I'm in this tribe that it's not, you don't even have to talk about politics in the workplace for people to feel like they are in conflict with other people. So I think it's actually helpful for leaders to acknowledge that and to maybe address it a little bit more head on, to be able to say, I know that we're in this very difficult, divided time in our country. And here's what I think we can do with this in the workplace. Because one of the things that we know is that the more people actually have the opportunity to engage with other three-dimensional human beings who have a different view than they have, then the more it breaks down those cognitive biases. So, and we want to correct for those misperceptions that we have. So I think just laying out some of what I'm talking about, saying we often have misperceptions of other people or very narrow views of them. And so let's not jump to conclusions about people based on the language that they use or the bumper sticker that you saw in their car in the parking lot. That it's really important to understand more from people the meaning that things have for them. And so if you want to know more about that, then that's something that you can do rather than jumping to conclusions. I think that can be a helpful approach.
It's interesting. You talk about understanding that people have from different tribes, right? We view them from different tribes going back to our history. Organizations create their own tribes, right? The tribe of marketing doesn't speak well with the tribe of sales. The tribe of engineering doesn't speak well with the tribe of product management. So you have these natural flowing conflicts all over the place. So I'm going to let you do like a helpful plug, right? It's a plug for your book, but also a plug for organization, how to use it. So if an organization was going to run like a little internal book club discussion around some of the skills that you lay out, what are one or two of the skills that you'd say, okay, start here, read the book, and then get together and talk about doing or potentially trying these things?
Yeah. So in Facing the Fracture, like I said, starts with how do we just deal with all of this polarizing input that we're getting? And a lot of that comes from news and social media. So social media is something that we've got to, whether or not there's political division, we are struggling with how we deal with social media and news. So actually, corporations are losing employee time and energy to emotionally activating news and social media. So that is something that's helpful on every level, like working with people on, okay, let's look at our use of social media and let's, not necessarily put up barriers for people like you're not allowed to post these things, but say, okay, there are things that we can do. There's this book like How to Break Up with Your Phone, that there are things that we can do that we can support each other in our own growth and development. And that's a great thing to do, where you're creating a community of, hey, we're all on the same side here and we're trying to figure out how we do this, or how do we take in the news? And especially these days, like there's so much just activating news like constantly. There's just a barrage of it all the time. So how do we want to deal with that throughout our day, and helping people to really support each other in doing that. So I think that's a great approach for some of the things that are affecting people. And you don't even have to say you're doing it around politics. Like you can just be like, these are things that people are struggling with. If you do want to focus on the stuff more about, the challenges that people are having, connecting with each other, I think addressing some of the cognitive biases that we were talking about and just providing some more understanding of that is helpful. And then Beyond Your Bubble is really good if you want to focus specifically on how to have dialogue. But I'm just going to say not everybody's at the point where that's where they should start.
Yeah, it's interesting. We started our discussion with the mention of curiosity. What came to my mind as you're talking, if I was going to think about a workshop that I might do, might have people come together and talk about what is curiosity? How would it be valuable for us as a group or an organization? And how can we demonstrate curiosity in our ongoing interactions? It sounds like that, that might be a nice sort of little workshop to hold internally around after reading your book as well.
Oh yes, and you said you were going to give me an opportunity for a plug. So I should also probably say I do programs, and
Nice.
I yes, I do programs, I do workshops, I do talks. So it's something that I'm more than happy to come into a workplace and help people to do this. I've done plenty of that, and think that it can be, sometimes a really valuable kickoff to more things that an organization wants to do, or it could be sort of a follow up to if people are, reading my books or other kinds of things. So yeah, that can be a really helpful kind of approach.
Great. That's sort of an interesting transition sort of as we sort of wrap up a little bit, which is talking about what you do. You spent your career helping people navigate divides, foster understanding, and create more meaningful connections. When you think about the impact of your work, what do you hope your legacy will be, both in the lives of individuals and in the broader conversation about leadership and humanity?
Hmm. That's so great. One of the things that I'm trying to do is to help people stay connected. And that's on every level. That's people's connection just with themselves, with their authentic selves, people's connections with family members, with community, and also how do we stay connected? How do we stay knit together in this country to support our democracy? So I'm like, well, yes, if I could have a legacy, I would love to say, yes, I saved our democracy by helping people to stay more connected to each other. Because certainly I think the more divided we are, the more chance we have of losing not just the rights that we have, but the collective good that we do together. So that's really where I am and what I want to be doing. It's helping people to realize their potential, not just individually, but also as part of a collective.
I love that. This is Founding Fathers and Tania Israel coming together.
I'm right now reading Team of Rivals, which is about Abraham Lincoln's cabinet. So I just do like to do these deep dives back into our history to say, gosh, we made it through a civil war. How did we do that? And how do we keep ourselves from getting there again?
Great. Well, I'm going to end with three questions that I like to ask all my guests. The first one is, what's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
I'm going to say the word integrity. Integrity comes from this word that means wholeness. And so I think that that's going to be important is for people to be able to embrace that wholeness within themselves and to bring other people together as a whole.
Awesome. Now, here's another thing I do. I empower my speakers, my guests, for a moment with a magic wand. And if you could wave that magic wand and immediately make things change, what would you do to make organizations more humanity-centric?
Well, I do have a wand. So I will
Use it.
imagine that it could actually, yes, that I could actually use it to do this. I think what I would do is to have people want to understand each other more and want to connect more with each other. So it would really be imbuing everyone with this curiosity and openness to others.
Great. And I think I might have to have you back for another podcast to just talk about that wand and what you do with it. So, but instead, I'll end with my last question for you, which is just for leaders who are inspired by your work, what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with them?
Well, first of all, I want to express some appreciation to them because leadership is a very difficult thing to do, especially in these divisive times. So I think I want to say I'm grateful for what you do as a leader. And I would also say, reach out for some support, from me, from other leaders, because don't try to just figure it all out yourself and do it all on your own, that you are also part of a collective that can support you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tania. This has been an amazing discussion.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is marvelous what you're doing.
I hope you found my conversation with Tania Israel as insightful as I did. Her perspective on leadership in divided times, her practical strategies for fostering connection and empathy are not only timely but essential for leaders navigating today's complexities. If you enjoyed this discussion, I encourage you to share it with others who might benefit from these ideas, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more inspiring conversations. Now let's dive into the after show, a segment where I reflect on the key takeaways from the episode and share additional thoughts and insights. Welcome to the after show, where I'm excited to share some thoughts about my discussion with Tania Israel. I urge you to read her great books, Facing the Fracture and Beyond Your Bubble. One of the biggest themes in our conversation was curiosity. Tania made a great point. Real dialogues aren't just about listening. It's about wanting to understand. We've all heard someone say, I just can't understand how someone could think that way. But what if, instead of shutting down, we leaned into that confusion? What if we treated that feeling as a signal to explore more rather than retreat? Harvard researcher Francesca Gino has done some interesting work on curiosity in leadership. Her studies show that leaders who ask more questions, not just to poke holes, but to genuinely understand, create teams that are more collaborative, creative, and resilient. The key is going beyond surface-level listening and approaching differences with the mindset of a learner. Tania also broke down some of the unconscious biases that drive division. One that really stood out was motive attribution asymmetry, a mouthful. The belief that our side is driven by good intentions while the other side is acting out of selfishness and hostility. When both sides believe this about each other, no wonder conversations shut down before they even start. This bias isn't just about political issue. It happens everywhere, from workplace disagreements to family arguments. Research on intergroup conflict has shown that when people assume bad intent from others, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment we believe someone is against us, we stop listening, and they in turn do the same. But when we shift to assuming good intent, or at least leaving space for more complex reality, we open the door to connection. This brings us to a major question. What can leaders do about this? Organizations aren't immune from division, whether it's political, departmental, or just a clash of personalities. The same human tendencies show up at work. Tania highlighted how important it is for leaders to acknowledge these tensions rather than pretend they don't exist. Another key approach is encouraging people to be more intentional about how they consume information. The constant flood of polarizing content makes it easy to get stuck in echo chambers. Leaders can help by promoting a culture of thoughtful discussion, whether through internal forums, recommended reading, or simply modeling balanced perspectives in their own communication. When people develop awareness of how information influences their perceptions, they become better equipped to engage in meaningful dialogue rather than react defensively. This whole discussion made me think about another useful concept from negotiation theory, the difference between positions and interests. While Tania spoke about how biases shape conflict, understanding the difference between positions, what people say they want, and interest, the deeper motivation behind those positions, can be an effective tool for leaders. When discussions get stuck in a rigid demand, we need to do X versus we must do Y, it's helpful to step back and uncover the underlying interests. Often those deeper needs reveal common ground or unexpected solutions that address concerns from both sides. By shifting focus from surface level demands to core motivations, leaders can guide conversations towards resolution instead of stalemate. So how do we take all of this and actually put it into practice? Here are a few ways to start. Create spaces for constructive conversations. Build opportunities for people to practice curiosity-driven discussions, whether through structured team meetings, book clubs, or informal gatherings. Second, recognize and challenge biases. Help people become aware of their assumptions about others. Even just asking, is it possible I'm misinterpreting their intent, can be a game changer. The third, develop some emotional regulation skills. When we're triggered by a disagreement, our first reaction is often to defend. Simple practices like deep breathing, pausing, and responding, or even taking a short walk can keep discussions from escalating. The final idea, facilitate perspective sharing exercises. Instead of simply bringing teams together, create structured opportunities for them to see things through each other's eyes. Role swapping exercises, storytelling sessions, or even temporary cross-functional assignments can help people build empathy and understand the challenges that others face. At the heart of this conversation is a simple but powerful truth. We can choose to engage differently. It's not about convincing others to agree with us. It's about creating the conditions where real connection can happen. When we focus on understanding instead of proving a point, we shift the dynamic completely. So here's something to try. The next time you find yourself frustrated by someone's perspective, pause and ask, what if I made understanding my goal instead of winning this argument? That small shift can make a world of difference. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.